On the freezing, bloodless night of December 31st, 1998, the finance ministers of Europe had been popping champagne corks. In the skyscrapers of Frankfurt and the government palaces of Brussels, there was a sense of euphoria. They believed they had been witnessing the give-up of history. They believed they have been about to acquire a dream that had eluded Charlemagne and Napoleon. They have been about to unite the continent of Europe, not through the sword, but through the ledger. When the clock struck night time and the calendar turned to January 1st, 199,911 proud international locations surrendered their oldest image of sovereignty. They gave up their country-wide currencies. The French Franc, the German Mark, the Italian Lira, and the Spanish peseta efficiently ceased to exist as independent forces. In their vicinity got here a brand new electronic ghost forex called the euro. To the politicians clinking glasses in Brussels, this changed into a second of peace and brotherhood. They told the public that the euro might bring prosperity. They stated it'd give up battle for all time, because nations that shared a wallet would not shoot at every other. They stated it'd make Europe a superpower that would look the USA in the eye. But they had been lying, or possibly they have been simply deluded due to the fact on that cold night in January, they had no longer constructed a cathedral of harmony. They had constructed an economic doomsday system. They had locked 19 different economies with 19 one-of-a-kind culture and 19 unique levels of productivity into an unmarried rigid room. And they'd thrown away the key to apprehend why January 1st, 1999 turned into the day Europe walked right into a lure. We must understand what money really is. For a sovereign kingdom, money isn't always just a medium of trade. It is a surprise absorber. It is a protection valve. When a rustic receives into problem, while its economy becomes uncompetitive or its money owed end up too excessive, it has a magical tool at its disposal. It can devalue its forex. Let us examine the history of Italy to apprehend this. Before 1999, Italy turned into a business powerhouse, but it had a hassle with inflation and authority spending. The Italian authorities spent cash like water. They had a large debt. In a rigid gadget, Italy could have long passed bankrupt in the 70s or 80s. But Italy had the Lira, and the Italian principal bank had the printing press. When Italian wages got too excessive and Italian fiats have become too costly for Germans to shop for, the Bank of Italy could clearly print more LRA. This could decrease the cost of the foreign money overnight. Italian vehicles and clothes and wine could come to be 20% inexpensive for the relaxation of the world. Exports might increase, factories could open, and the disaster would skip. It became a dirty trick, but it labored. It allowed Italy to stay in commercial large, despite its political chaos. On January 1st, 1999, Italy voluntarily passed over the keys to that printing press to a new landlord in Germany. The European Central Bank became set up in Frankfurt. Its mandate changed into not to assist Italy promote cars. Its mandate turned into to combat inflation. It changed into built at the version of the German Bundesbank. The Germans had a cultural trauma approximately inflation courting return to the 20s, whilst a wheelbarrow of cash couldn't buy a loaf of bread. So the Germans insisted that the new euro need to be as hard as steel. It should in no way be devalued. This changed into the hidden trap. By becoming a member of the Euro nations like Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal, surrendered their only defense mechanism in opposition to financial truth. They have become like an owner of a house who takes out a large loan but arms control of his bank account to his neighbor. As lengthy, because the sun turned into shining and the financial system was growing, no person noticed the chains. In fact, in the early years, the chains felt like feathers. The first decade of the euro changed into a celebration. It turned into a hallucination of wealth. This became the bait in the lure. Before the euro, if Greece desired to borrow money from international buyers, they needed to pay a completely excessive hobby fee, perhaps 18% or 20%. This changed into because traders knew that the dashma became unstable foreign money. They knew that Greece would possibly devalue or inflate the debt away. This high hobby rate acted like a velocity restriction. It prevented the Greek government from borrowing an excessive amount of as it became too high priced to provide the debt. But on January 1st, 1999, the markets looked at Greece, and that they saw the euro. They saw the signature of Germany. Suddenly, worldwide banks in New York and London and Paris began lending cash to Greece at almost the same interest rate as they lent to Germany. The interest rate on Greek debt collapsed from 18% to a few percent. It became unfastened money. It turned into a credit card with no limit and no annual price. The southern European nations went on a spending spree that makes the Roman emperor's appearance frugal. The Greek authorities doubled the salaries of public zone workers. They allowed humans to retire in their 50 seconds with full pensions. They sold submarines and tanks they did not want. In Spain, they used the cheap money to construct a real estate bubble of biblical proportions. They poured concrete over the complete shoreline. They built airports where no planes landed and highways that led to nowhere. In Ireland, they built housing estates for ghosts. The politicians in the South were hailed as geniuses. They had been handing over a first international lifestyle on a third global price range. The citizens loved them. No one asked where the cash was coming from. No one requested what might appear while the invoice came due. They believed the lie that the euro had magically made Greece as productive as Germany. But whilst the South changed into partying, Germany changed into working. This is the second one, a part of the entice. The euro became a disaster for the South. But it became a gold mine for the German commercial device. Before the euro, whenever the German economic system did properly, the German mark would boom in value. This made German cars like Mercedes and BMW extra luxurious for foreigners to buy. A robust forex became a natural smash on German dominance. It gave different countries a hazard to compete. But with the euro, this break turned into reduce. Germany became now tied to the weaker economies of the South. The weak spot of the Italian and Greek economies acted as an anchor, maintaining the value of the euro lower than the German mark might have been on its own. This meant that German exports were artificially cheap. Germany began to run huge alternate surpluses. They exported their vehicles and their machines to the very nations that had been borrowing the reasonably priced money. It became an excellent recycling mechanism. German banks lent cash to Greek clients so that Greek purchasers could buy German vehicles. The money left Frankfurt went to Athens, after which got here right again to Frankfurt. Germany becomes seller financing its personal customers. The German financial system BME'd, while the commercial base of Italy and France turned into hollowed out. They could not compete with the efficient German gadget, and they might not devalue their forex to compensate. The factories in Milan and Turin started out to shut. The fabric turbines in Portugal went silent. The olive oil manufacturers in Spain observed themselves undercut. The euro, which was presupposed to deliver convergence, was certainly developing a huge divergence. The North turned into getting richer and extra green. The South turned into getting debt-ridden and uncompetitive. The elastic band that held Europe collectively became being stretched to the breaking point. But the bureaucrats in Brussels refused to look it. They have been blinded by way of ideology. They pointed to the low inflation figures and the stability of the change charge. They congratulated themselves on the achievement of the venture. They improved the euro core, inviting increasingly nations into the trap. They overlooked the warnings of economists who mentioned which you cannot have a single currency without an unmarried government. They not noted the history of the gold preferred, which had precipitated the Great Depression. They believed that political will should triumph over the legal guidelines of arithmetic. Then came the year 2008. The global economic crisis exploded in Wall Street. The shock waves rolled across the Atlantic. At first, the Eurozone leaders claimed they have been immune. They stated it turned into an Anglo-Saxon crisis caused by grasping American bankers. They had been wrong. The disaster stripped away the illusion of the euro. It discovered the bare fact that had been hidden considering January 1st, 1999, when the credit markets iced up. The traders all at once awoke from their dream. They checked out the debt piles in Greece and Italy and Spain, and they found out a terrifying reality. They're changed into no German assure. The German taxpayers had in no way agreed to pay the money owed of the Greek authorities. The euro became now not a unified sovereign forex. It became a set of country-wide debts masquerading as one. The sudden stop commenced. This is the nightmare scenario for any debtor. For 10 years, cash had flowed from the north to the south like an effective river. Suddenly the river ran dry. The banks stopped lending. They demanded their money lower back, but the cash changed into long gone. It was spent on concrete and imported automobiles and pension checks. In everyday United States with its own forex, that is the instant where the protection valve would pop. The currency would crash. The debt would be inflated away. The economy could take a success, but it might live on. But Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal did no longer have their own forex. They were trapped in a burning building with the doors locked from the outdoor. They couldn't print cash to pay the infantrymen and the doctors. They could not devalue to reinforce exports. The only option left turned into something economists name inner devaluation. This is a sterile educational term for a brutal human fact. If you cannot lower the price of your foreign money, you ought to lower the cost of your people. You must scale back wages. You ought to fire workers. You have to cut pensions. You should damage the usual of dwelling of your populace until they're so terrible that they turn out to be aggressive again. This brings us to the tragedy of Greece, which became the first domino to fall. In late 2009, the new Greek authorities found out that the preceding government have been lying about the deficit numbers. The deficit became no longer 3%. It changed into 15%. The markets panicked. The interest costs on Greek debt skyrocketed. The USA changed into insolvent. On January 1st, 1999, the Greek humans had celebrated becoming a member of the Club of Rich Nations. 10 years later, they found themselves occupied by means of a brand new type of military. It changed into now not a military of squaddies, but an army of accountants. They were called the Troa, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. These three unelected bodies took manage of the Greek economy. They dictated the legal guidelines. They rewrote the finances. They told the Greek parliament what to do. The Troika did now not care approximately the struggling of the Greek people. Their priority turned into to keep the euro, or extra appropriately, their priority changed into to keep the French and German banks that had lent billions to Greece. If Greece defaulted, the big banks in Paris and Frankfurt might have taken large losses. They might have collapsed. The politicians in Berlin and Paris could not permit that, so they engineered a bailout. They gave billions of euros to the Greek government, but not a cent of it went to the Greek people. It flowed through Athens and went instantly returned to the lenders. It turned into a moine, laundering operation designed to keep the northern banks whilst pretending to help the southern nation. In exchange for this mortgage, which Greece could in no way pay off, the Troa demanded savage austerity. They demanded that the minimum wage be reduced. They demanded that hospitals run out of drugs. They demanded that faculties turn off the heating in wintry weather. The suicide charge in Greece soared. People were looking for meals and garbage boxes inside the shadow of the Acropolis. The kids' unemployment price hit 50%. The entire era had become thrown beneath the scrap heap. And via all of it, the entice of January 1st, 1999 held company. The Greek human beings voted in referendum after referendum towards austerity. They rioted in Syntagma Square. They burned the flag of the European Union. But it failed to matter. The trap became mathematical as long as they stayed inside the euro, that they had no sovereignty. Their democracy became an illusion. The actual power lay in Frankfurt with the unelected technocrats who managed the liquidity of the banking machine. The European Central Bank proved to be the final enforcer when the Greek government tried to resist the demands of the lenders. ECB in reality threatened to cut off the liquidity to the Greek banks. They threatened to shut down the ATMs. They weaponized the cash to deliver in opposition to a member state. It turned into a brutal show of electricity. It confirmed that inside the euro area, national democracy is secondary to monetary stability. The tragedy of the euro isn't simply an economic tale. It is a tale approximately the betrayal of the European dream. The task that was supposed to unite the continent has rather revived the oldest hatreds in Europe. The Germans take a look at the south and spot lazy moochers who need to scouse borrow their tax cash. The Greeks and Italians take a look at the north and see cruel overlords who want to show them into debt colonies. The stereotypes of the Second World War were dusted off and positioned again into circulation, and the trap remains there. The crisis of 2010 changed into never simply solved. It was just papered over with more debt and extra printing. The structural flaw of the euro stays. You can't have a single economic policy for such unique economies. You cannot lock a Ferrari and a tractor together and anticipate them to pressure on the equal velocity. As we cease the first, a part of this script, we are status within the wreckage of the Greek disaster. We see the smoke growing from the streets of Athens. We see the boarded up shops in Rome and Madrid. But the story gets darker, because the architects of the euro did no longer just make a mistake. They knew what they had been doing. There is proof that the founders of the euro understood that a crisis would appear. In truth, they welcomed it. They believed in an idea called the useful crisis. They believed that after the crisis hit, it might pressure the nations of Europe to surrender even extra sovereignty. They believed that the simplest way out of the trap would be to transport forward right into a United States of Europe. In the second part of this deep dive, we are able to examine the name of the game mechanisms that maintain the trap closed. We will study the Target 2 payment system, a hidden ledger of trillions of euros that binds the significant banks together. We will observe the upward push of the populist movements, which can be attempting to break the chains. And we are able to ask the last query, can the euro live to tell the tale, or is it destined to result in a chaotic explosion on the way to tear the European Union apart? The day Europe deleted its cash became the day it signed a settlement with destiny, and the Eins is nonetheless wet. The disaster that started in Greece changed into now not contained with the aid of the borders of that small kingdom. Like a contagion, it spread throughout the southern flank of Europe. infecting the economies of Portugal, Ireland, Italy, and Spain. The acronym PEGS became coined through cynical traders in London and New York to describe these countries. It became a derogatory term, but it meditated the brutal fact of the bond market. These countries had been being slaughtered, and the weapon getting used to slaughter them became the very foreign money that they had followed with such wish on January 1st, 1999. To recognize the depth of the entice, we should study the mechanics of the Target 2 gadget. This is a technical challenge. This is nearly by no means discussed in the mainstream media due to the fact it's far too complex and too terrifying. Target is the interfee system of the Euro region. When a Greek citizen buys a German vehicle, cash has to move from the Greek critical bank to the German Bundesbank. In a regular international, this would be settled with gold or foreign currency reserves. But within the magical global of the euro, no settlement is required. The Greek central financial institution truly issues an IOU to the device. The German significant financial institution accepts a claim on the machine. For years, as the South imported German goods and as capital fled from the risky South to the secure North, these imbalances grew to astronomical levels. The German Bundesbank built up a big credit declare of over 1 trillion euros towards the rest of the gadget. The significant banks of Italy and Spain built up massive money owed. This is the hidden chain that binds them together. Italy had been to leave the euro these days and return to the LRA. It technically owed masses of billions of euros to Germany. It is a financial suicide, vest strapped to the chest of the complete continent. If one of us pulls the cause, anyone blows up. This hidden liability explains why the European leaders fought so tough to save Greece from leaving. It wasn't pretty much Greece. If Greece left and defaulted on its gold liabilities, the German taxpayer would have found out that 1 trillion euros of their countrywide wealth became simply imaginary numbers on a PC screen in Frankfurt. The lure of January 1st, 1999 changed into designed to be irreversible. The architects had burned the bridges behind them. As the disaster dragged on from 2010 to 2012, the social material of Europe started to rip. In Italy, the economic heartland of the North started to resent the subsidies flowing to the South and to the rest of Europe. The technocratic authorities of Mario Monti become established in Rome, basically by way of a coup d'etat orchestrated by means of Brussels. The elected chief, Silvio Berlusconi, turned into pressured out now not by the voters but through the bond markets. The yield on Italian debt spiked, and the European Central Bank dispatched a secret letter to Rome disturbing reforms. It was a stark demonstration that the era of countrywide sovereignty was over. The Prime Minister of Italy replied to Frankfurt, no longer to the Italian humans. In Spain, the youngsters' unemployment price hit 55%. An entire era of architects, engineers, and doctors packed their bags and left. They moved to London, to Berlin, to tiny apartments in northern towns, serving espresso to the residents of the creditor nation. It was a big brain drain. The South changed into exporting its maximum treasured aid, its human capital, to the North. This deepened the economic divergence. The South were given older and poorer, while the North got the inflow of cheap professional exertions. The euro changed into functioning as a pump, sucking the lifeblood out of the Mediterranean. The political backlash was inevitable. The rise of populist events across Europe can be traced at once returned to the flaw of the euro. In Greece, the unconventional left party Syriza came to strength, promising to rip up the memorandum with the Troika. Their finance minister, Giannis Varoufakis, a leather-based, jacket-wearing economist, tried to barter with the creditors. He used common sense. He used sport concept. He defined that a bankrupt state cannot repay its money owed via shrinking its economy. He argued that the austerity becomes self-defeating. But he was talking to a wall. The German finance minister Wolfgang Schüll turned into no longer interested by economics. He changed into interested by morality. In the German worldview, debt is a sin. The German phrase for debt, Schuld, is the same as the phrase for guilt. Schüll believed that the Greeks had sinned with the aid of spending an excessive amount of it. Now they needed to do penance. The common sense of the ledger changed by using the good judgment of the pulpit. The euro had emerged as a morality play wherein the suffering of the South becomes seen as necessary for the redemption of their souls. In July 2015, the Greek drama reached its climax. The Greek human beings voted in a huge referendum to reject the bailout phrases. It was a resounding oxy. No, it became a cry of defiance towards the technocrats. But within 24 hours, the Greek High Minister, Alexis Tsipras, capitulated. He realized that the European Central Bank turned into ready to collapse the Greek banking device absolutely. He looked into the abyss and he blinked. He signed a surrender file that became even harsher than the one the people had rejected. This became the instant the arena saw the true nature of the European Union. It became now not a democracy. It became a benevolent dictatorship of the banks. The vote of the humans was irrelevant if it conflicted with the rules of the euro. The trap became absolute. But the defenders of the euro will let you know that the forex became saved. They will point to the famous speech by Mario Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank. In the summer of 2012, with the euro getting ready to disintegrate, Draghi stood up in London and said, "Within our mandate, the ECB is prepared to do anything it takes to keep the euro, and consider me, it will likely be sufficient." Those three phrases, anything it takes, modified records. Draghi changed into promising to print unlimited amounts of money to buy the bonds of the suffering nations. He became effectively turning the European Central Bank into the lender of final lodge, something the Germans had continually forbidden. The markets believed him. The panic subsided. The hobby quotes fell. The euro survived. But at what fee? The something it takes coverage has grew to become the Eurozone into a zombie financial system. To maintain the South afloat, the ECB has pushed interest rates to zero and even into bad territory. They have flooded the machine with reasonably priced cash. This has created huge asset bubbles in real property and inventory markets, enriching the rich. While the wages of the running magnificents stay stagnant, it has kept alive zombie organizations that should have long passed bankrupt, preventing the innovative destruction that drives capitalism. And the fundamental trouble has no longer been constant. Italy has not grown in 20 years. Its GDP in step with capita is decreased today than it turned into when it joined the euro. The Italian commercial base continues to erode. The debt pile continues to grow. The entice of January 1st, 1999 is largely a gradual strangulation. It isn't always a surprising dying, however a long, lingering decline. The south of Europe is being turned into a nursing home and a traveler, destination dependent on transfers from the north to live on. This situation is politically unsustainable. A union that generates everlasting winners and permanent losers cannot continue to exist forever. The anger is constructing. We see it in the yellow vest protests in France. We see it in the rise of the Brothers of Italy. We see it within the Alternative for Germany birthday party, which argues that Germany need to stop paying for the South. The centrifuge of history is spinning quicker and faster. The irony is that the euro changed into designed to prevent German dominance. The French President François Mitterrand famously demanded the euro because the fee for permitting German reunification. He desired to tie the German giant down with European ropes. He desired to put off the like German mark to make sure that Germany could in no way once more dominate the continent. But the opposite befell. The euro became the automobile for German monetary hegemony. By locking the change fees, it gave German enterprise an everlasting gain that no other USA should suit. Germany nowadays dictates the monetary coverage of the complete continent. The budget of Italy is decided in Brussels, which takes its orders from Berlin. Mitterrand's trap backfired. He built a cage for the German tiger. However, he locked himself interior with it. So what's the future of this economic experiment? There are most effective methods out of the entice. The first is a complete political union. This way, a United States of Europe in which imperative authorities in Brussels collects taxes from absolutely everyone and distributes them to all people. In this situation, the Germans would permanently subsidize the Italians just as New York subsidizes Mississippi and America. But there may be no political will for this. The German citizens will never accept it, and the French voters will in no way take delivery of the lack of their closing sovereignty. The 2D option is a breakup. This is the doomsday situation. If Italy or France were to leave the euro, the chaos could be inconceivable. The new Lira or franc would crash in cost. Inflation would explode. The banks would fail. The savings of thousands and thousands of people would be worn out. The felony battles over the money owed could final for decades. It would be the monetary equal of a nuclear war. This is why the system maintains. The worry of the breakup maintains the prisoners in the mobile. The politicians kick the can down the road hoping that a miracle will happen. They print more money. They create new emergency budget. They fudge the policies. They live each day praying that the shape holds together for just one extra election cycle. But history teaches us that foreign money unions do now not last without political unions. The Latin financial union of the 19th century failed. The Scandinavian financial union failed. The Austro-Hungarian forex failed. Money is a social contract. It calls for accept as true with and a shared experience of destiny. The euro has stripped away the gear of countrywide survival, but it has no longer changed them with a European identity sturdy sufficient to bear the aid of the modifications. January 1st, 1999 will be remembered with the aid of historians as a turning point. It changed into the day Europe attempted to pressure reality to bend to its will. It turned into an act of hubris. The leaders of that point believed they could banish the commercial enterprise cycle and erase the variations between nations with a single decree. They forgot that a financial system is like a dwelling environment. If you try to position a rigid concrete block over a forest, the roots will ultimately crack the concrete. The cracks are already seen. The debt in Italy is better than ever. The resentment in Germany is growing. The global economic system is moving. When the next essential disaster hits, and it really will, the euro will face its closing take a look at. The gear that have been used to shop it, ultimate time, hobby fee cuts, and cash printing are already exhausted. The valuable bank is out of ammunition. The story of the euro is a caution. It is a caution approximately what occurs whilst you prioritize political symbols over monetary reality. It is a warning approximately the hazard of surrendering sovereignty to unelected technocrats, and it's far a caution that there is no such issue as a free lunch. The reasonably priced credit that flowed within the early years was no longer a present. It became a mortgage taken out towards the future of the continent. And now the bill is being paid inside the form of misplaced generations, stagnation, and political extremism. The map of Europe nowadays appears unified. The borders are open. The currency is the equal. But under the surface, the iron chains of debt are pulling the continent apart. The trap that changed into set on that cold night in 1999 has sprung. And we're all still dwelling interior it, waiting to look if the partitions will hold or if the roof will sooner or later crumble. I'm John, and this is the Cinematics History Tales channel.